In today's episode, Fire Chief Roger LeBlanc tells us how much time we really have to get out of a burning house. And later, I chat with Natalie Heneghan of Rethos, Places Reimagined in St. Paul, Minnesota. But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House, and I am the host of True Tales from Old Houses. Welcome to Season 7. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It's so good to be here. I feel like I used my downtime to accomplish very little on my to-do list, but I sure did enjoy that slower pace. I did quite a lot of podcast planning and recording, and this season is shaping up quite nicely. Once again, we are supported by the Window Course, and we have a brand new sponsor, Abitron, and I'll tell you about both of them later. This season, I have a wide variety of guests, and a couple of them even live outside of the United States. I'm going to hit the safety topics a little more thoroughly in Q&A, and we're just going to have our usual good time together. I am already missing that Halifax Christmas tree story that we managed to stretch out across, 3 or 4 episodes? So if anyone has anything else we can weave throughout Season 7, then shoot me a message, and I don't know, maybe we can start an urban legend or something. We sure did get a lot of mileage out of that tree. I have an announcement for you today, and it comes from Jessica, who works for Historic Madison Incorporated in Madison, Indiana. June 17th and 18th, Historic Madison is hosting a Save the Sash window restoration workshop right there in Madison, Indiana. Now, I have to be honest, I thought this workshop was just the 17th, but when I looked at the flyer, it also has the 18th listed. So I think you should probably clarify that with Jessica before you make your plans. But an in-person workshop is an excellent way to learn. So if you're close, I highly recommend putting this Save the Sash on your calendar because the fee is very reasonable. I'm going to post a link to that flyer. And again, reach out to Jessica about those dates and if you have any questions. I definitely should have done that before I made this announcement. Sorry about that. If you work or volunteer for an organization, nonprofit or not, it really doesn't matter to me. Let me know if you have an event or a workshop you want me to announce on an upcoming episode, and I would be happy to do that. If it benefits the Old House community, then let me help you spread the word. I also want to remind everyone that I am hosting a tour to Scotland and Northern Ireland, July 12th through 22nd through holiday vacations. You can find out all about that exciting trip on the True Tales from Old Houses website and the Blake Hill House blog. Next episode, Diane, who's the tour coordinator, she's going to be here to talk a little bit more about how all of this works. You might have questions. And there's so much history in that region, and we'll be learning a chunk of it as well as seeing loads of historic architecture. I'm really looking forward to traveling with all of you. And you're probably going to be hearing a lot about this trip from me for the next few weeks because those final payments are due on April 8th. And finally, I did start a little something new over on Instagram during the break. Since this podcast is bi-weekly, I really wanted to do some content for you on the off weeks. So Friday nights, on those off weeks, I'll be hosting Instagram live sessions with a guest at 8 p.m. I wanted to try this out before making a big announcement, so I already did one with homeowners Nick and Damien from the Kimball House. We talked about their experience of getting the Kimball House listed on the National Register of Historic Places and applying for rehabilitation tax credits. They completely demystified the whole process, and that conversation is available right now on Instagram on my Blake Hill House account, and I'll link that on the show notes. I'm trying to see if I can get these sessions on the Facebook group too, because I realize we don't have time to jump all over social media looking for stuff. I get that. And if I can, I'll also try to publish them on the True Tales from Old Houses website, but I cannot guarantee that one. Instagram loves being proprietary. They do not like sharing. The next Instagram live session will be Friday, March 11th at 8 p.m. The topic and guests are to be determined because I'm talking to a few potential guests right now, but I'll let you know. Okay, that's it. Let's get Season 7 rolling. My guest for Q&A today is Roger LeBlanc, Fire Chief of the East Aurora Fire Department at a village of approximately 7,000 people in Western New York. Hi, Roger.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're here today to talk about fire safety and old houses. And I just want to give my listeners a little backstory before we start to talk to each other.
Sure.
A newspaper article, it was published originally in 2016, and recently it made a comeback. It was written as a press piece, I think, for a book written by author Jeff Rawson titled Rawson to the Rescue, Secrets of Avoiding Scams, Everyday Dangers, and Major Catastrophes. So it was probably just one chapter in an entire book, not necessarily related to fire prevention or fire safety. And the republication of the article referenced a quote from Rawson's book that said, and I'm just going to read that quote today. It says, research shows that 30 years ago, you had about 17 minutes to escape a house fire, and today it's only 3 or 4 minutes. Now, in the old house community, that quote was quickly turned into a meme and distributed widely on social media, as often happens. And to most people, it was one more bit of proof that old houses are fantastic, which I absolutely do not deny. However, I thought it was an interesting tidbit of information, and I understand why old materials burn more slowly, but I strongly feel that no old house owner should expect to have a long period of time to get out of a burning house, and certainly not 17 minutes. So I wanted you to weigh in with your expert opinion, Roger, and the old house inventory, I think here in East Aurora, is around 90%.
Yes, that's correct.
So many old houses, which is great. You're the perfect person to ask all these questions to. And the first question is, has it been your experience that old houses burn slower than new construction?
They do. Basically, it's the materials that were used, years ago. It's more wood, if you want to go that way. Newer constructions are more prefabbed or use synthetics and use gusset plates for nailing, where the old houses actually used real nails. So gusset plates basically anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch of nails, so to speak, that would connect trusses together. Okay. And during intense heat, those pop.
Oh, and then the trusses just collapse, I suppose.
That's correct.
Hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
And modern materials can sometimes be coated, even if they're actual, or they start out as wood, they can be coated with products that could be flammable.
Yeah, it's your laminates, laminated woods. They're very strong in construction, but they quickly break down when they're impeded by fire.
Okay. So does how a house is built, does that influence how fast it burns? I know we have different types of framing in old houses compared to modern construction.
In older homes, probably the biggest problem that I've seen is the balloon construction homes. Is there's no fire stops between rafters going up. So basically, if you have a fire in the basement, it's in the attic.
Okay, just travels right up the walls?
Acts like a chimney.
Oh.
So in between floors, it's racing up.
Right. So how does fire travel in a balloon framed house? Let's say, like you said, maybe there's a combustible or something in the basement that catches fire, and then you said it travels up the walls.
Basically, yeah, it's looking for air, it's looking for oxygen. And basically your interior wall acts like a chimney flue.
Okay.
So it races up, and it's in the attic as soon as it's in starts the fire in the basement.
And then once it gets to the attic, is the pattern for the house to collapse down, or does fire travel into the house, to the walls? How does that work?
If it goes up into the attic and then it basically spreads across the attic, then you have a full attic fire. Yes, a lot of the collapse would be because we're putting water.
Oh, sure.
The weight of water. And of course, as the fire goes up between the walls, you're breaking down the integrity of the structure. So anytime you're using a gallon of water is, I guess you can say 7.25 pounds, and you're putting a lot of water on an older home, the integrity of the home tends to collapse or fall.
Are most of the houses here in this particular village balloon framed? The old ones, like pre-war?
Yeah, they're all. That's the way they did them back then. People that either did home repair or did stuff in their house might put fire stops between floors. And basically that's a piece of wood in between the rafters that would impede the fire from continuing all the way up to the attic space.
So contain it on one floor or basement or whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So realistically, how much time should a person or family take to get out of their house?
The biggest thing we always tell, either in fire prevention or in schools, is to get out as soon as you see a fire. Fighting a fire without the proper equipment, you have smoke. There's a lot of variables that come to a fire. You can get burned. You got the smoke inhalation. So it's like as soon as you see there's a house, your house is on fire, to please exit And people now with cell phones, basically you walk around with a cell phone in your hand all the time. Or if you don't, to go across the street or find a neighbor or flag somebody down to call the fire department. Basically, if you have a house fire, you shouldn't fight it yourself. If you have something in the kitchen and you have on a stove and it's kind of in a controlled environment, and you move the pot to the sink, maybe, or if you have a trash can and you have a ready available extinguisher, you can probably handle it that way. But if it's something that started and it had time to grow, you're never going to put this thing out alone, even with a fire extinguisher.
What would you say your best fire prevention and safety tip would be for old house owners? I know there's some for all homeowners, but is there anything specific to old houses?
Well, probably the biggest reason for an older house to catch fire, I would have to say, is the electrical. How updated was your electrical service? Is how old is your wiring? Do you have the proper voltage coming in for your house? You didn't have air conditioners and things like that when that house was built. And now we're putting things in homes that eat up more power and put a little bit more strain on your wires. So it would be updating your electrical on a home that's built around in the 1800s, which a lot of the homes here in East Aurora are. So that would be a big concern. And that'd probably be the number one reason why a house would catch on fire unless it was done unintentionally of putting combustibles in garbage cans or
candles or whatnot.
Yeah, things like that. That would probably be the number one cause for a house to catch fire is the electrical.
Sure. In the meantime, if some people know they have older electrical and I know you're not supposed to tether a bunch of extension cords together.
Well, we see that too. I mean, you don't have like in a modern home, you have a plug every so many feet around the house. In an older home, you don't. You may have maybe only 2 plugs or 3 in a room. So people run extension cords underneath their carpeting and underneath the furniture, and those are things that, and again, it leans back to your electrical service.
Do power strips with breakers, are those beneficial at all, or just not really?
Again, what are you putting on it? I mean, if you're putting in, an air conditioner and 5 lamps, I would have to say no.
Sure.
But
sure.
I guess you have to be smart on how and what you're plugging into it, and then never run an extension cord under a carpet or underneath some furniture along those lines. Yeah.
I appreciate that because I do think that a lot of people who are listening probably do all of those things.
We're all guilty of it. You love the luxury of TV and air conditioning and be able to read by the lamp. We're just used to it. We're living in a modern world, but you're living in a turn of the century home.
Something that's going around a lot in the social media where my groups are, a lot of people are looking at decor and they're thinking about, I don't want to see any of the cords. And so they're hiding all those.
Sure,
But
sure.
Unfortunately, it sounds like that's could be a fire risk.
We've definitely seen that as fires here as a cause.
Good to know. Coincidentally, I'm actually updating all of my wiring in my 1800s house.
Perfect.
I feel a little smug right now. No, I don't feel smug, but it has been on our list for a long time. And I will say it's such a relief to have that happening instead of having it on the list.
Old homes are beautiful. They have curb appeal. They've stood the test of time. And they're gorgeous. Some of the homes here are priceless. You look at them and inside they're just beautiful. Renovations of an old home, you don't want to take away from the character either. And that's understood because that's the reason why you either bought an older home because you love that character. But you got to take the precautions to at least keep that home safe and, of course, yourself.
So how should families make a fire safety plan? Do you have any tips for that? Or is that, if you have any links, I can put those on the show notes?
I think the biggest thing is, and I don't care what community you come from, probably the biggest thing is if you got a fire in a home and the first responding equipment, whether it's a chief, they're going to want to know if everyone's out of the house. And probably the best way to get that kind of information is when you're organizing some sort of evacuation plan for your family is a meeting place or someplace where if you have a fire and everybody evacuates the home to go to one specific spot. And that way that information come back to the officer on scene that everybody's out of the house and accounted for. everybody kind of runs and goes in different directions, we're going to assume that someone's in there, and then we're going to take a risk factor of going in with the potential of trying to find somebody. So I would highly recommend that all homeowners or homes have a centralized meeting place, whether it's the big tree in the front yard or it's the neighbor's house across the street. But these are all things that have to be obviously pre-planned by each family.
Sure.
No specific place is you got to do this. It's what's best for you.
So what's the best way, you bring up a good point, what is the best way to communicate the fire safety plan in your house, just in general, but also without making it a little maybe too scary?
We really don't think about it because where's your safest place? It's at home. Where do you go when you want to feel safe or you're somewhere and you feel that you're in danger? You want to be home. So discussing that in your safe place is something we really don't really think about. Subconsciously, you probably should, if to make sure that everybody is on the same wavelength. It's a hard thing to do, especially with younger children. One, you don't want to scare them. But as they start going to school, they're going to be getting these types of training or in the school level, whether the fire department responds to the schools and do fire prevention there, or it's taught at the school level by their own teachers. So questions are going to be, I would have to say, are going to be arisen from the children that come home. They conduct fire drills in schools. A lot of businesses, large office buildings conduct fire drills at the workplace. So this is something that it's not new to anybody. I think that's from probably 6 years old up to 70, right? But we don't talk about it at home. Maybe when the children get old enough and they start asking questions about this on Fire Prevention Week in October, that they learn some of these things, stop, drop, and roll, and meeting place, and some of these discussions, that's probably the best time to bring it up as a family. But do you wait that long, 5 years? Again, you really don't want to scare children, but I think it's important that they understand that their safety is important to the family. And then we get always asked the questions in schools like, I got a pet hamster, or I got a cat, I got this, I got that, and I want to go get I want to go back in and get my hamster or my gerbil or whatever. And
Heart-wrenching.
It is, because we love our pets as much as, they're part of the family too. And it's hard to tell them to say, come out, but reassure them that the faster they get out, the faster they get the word that there's a fire there, that you can grab one of the firemen and let them know what room is your pet in, or what are we looking for. We've rescued many of cats in a house fire. Some that were actually in the wall. I mean,
Wow.
we have tons of stories. And you talk to any firefighter, we've come across these things. Animals are very smart. Of course, they're a lot lower to the ground than we are,
Sure.
so they got the fresher air. Their survival instincts kick in. But if the person doesn't come out of the house to save themselves, one, to then report that their pet is still in there, we won't know. So that's two. So you saved yourself and you saved your pet.
Yeah, that's great.
And you got to put it in a way, so a child understands it.
Sure. And nobody knows your child more than you do as a parent.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Last thing you want somebody like me to come into school and tell you what to do with your pet. But
those are very good starting points. I didn't mean to say that you shouldn't be the one telling, but
right,
it's good to have more than one voice.
The family, the mom and the dad, or whoever's
whoever's in charge
in the home setting, knows how to relay that information to their child.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Roger. I appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure.
With me. It's great. So nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you too.
All right. Thanks so much.
Stay safe.
We will try.
Okay.
We will try. Thank you. If you have a question that you would like for me and a guest to answer on an upcoming episode, please contact the show via the True Tales from Old Houses website, or send me a direct message on Facebook or Instagram. I have some new topics in the queue this season, and I'm always open to more. And now it's your turn to answer a question. And we have a new one this season. I want to know, what have you learned since buying your old house? I gathered a few of your answers from Instagram. Connie from Heartwood Roses says, this one is easy. Listen to the house and don't try to make it something that it's not. It's great advice, Connie. Leslie Badger wrote, there's usually a curveball coming. So, as someone who has dodged a curveball or two, I agree wholeheartedly. And finally, Zach says, every project takes twice as long and triple the budget. We feel that, Zach. If you would like to share an answer to this season's question, head on over to truetalesfromoldhouses.com and let me know via the contact form or click on the mic icon in the bottom right-hand corner to leave a voicemail using your phone or computer. And once again, this season's question is, what have you learned since buying your old house? Philosophical? Practical? I assure you, there are no wrong answers. Let me take a moment to just thank our sponsors. This show simply could not happen without them. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by the Window Course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog and Abatron. The Window Course is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to know to successfully restore your wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go fast or you can go slow. It's entirely up to you. There are also several price points to fit your needs and budget. Now, looking out the window, I still see 2 feet of snow on the ground, but spring always comes. Now is the perfect time to get ready to restore windows at your house, and the Window Course has all of the information you need all in one place. Scott is still offering his students a special deal. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access package or the training package, then you'll also get a free infrared paint remover, which is a $130 value. What a deal. The Window Course is offered with a money-back guarantee, and I've got the same coupon code for you. Scott is offering True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by our brand new sponsor, Abatron. Abatron manufactures 2 of my very favorite products on the planet, liquid wood and wood epox. Over the years, I've talked about both a bunch on Instagram and my blog, and I've used them several times to repair wood rot on windows and doors. My daughter, she has this desk that, well, we lovingly call it the dumpster desk because we rescued it from the trash. It was missing its decorative feet, so I just sculpted a new set out of wood epox, and no one is the wiser. These 2 products make permanent, cost-effective repairs wherever you find rotted or damaged wood, and whether you are a first-timer or a professional tradesperson, Abatron products are super easy to use. The instructions are simple, the results are exceptional. No shrinking or sagging, and repairs can be sanded and painted just like wood. Follow Abatron on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find them at Abatron Inc. And to purchase liquid wood and wood epox, visit abatron.com and use my coupon code TrueTales10, that's the number 10, to save 10% on your order. My guest today is Natalie Heneghan. Natalie heads up the educational programs at Rethos, a nonprofit dedicated to revitalizing communities.
I'm Natalie Heneghan. I'm the education manager at Rethos, Places Reimagined. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I love old houses.
Thanks for being here, Natalie. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Rethos is kind of a big organization. I did a lot of research before you came to the show, and it's very exciting. So why don't you start by giving us a big picture, and then we'll break it down just a little.
Sure. Yeah. Rethos, we're a nonprofit organization headquartered in Minnesota where we have a couple offices, and our work is all about reusing and revitalizing old buildings. We've been around since 1981. For a long time, we were a volunteer-run preservation advocacy organization. You know, if a building was threatened with demolition, we'd be there trying to save it. And over the years, we realized that that kind of work can be important, but sort of unsustainable. A lot of buildings, need a lot of support much earlier than the time when they're threatened with demolition. So we kind of adjusted our focus and turned our attention to the people, communities, homeowners, building owners who are caring for old buildings, and asked ourselves what resources, what programs can we provide people to help them kind of get ahead of these, scary demolition moments. So our programs are varied, and I'm here representing our education program, but we try to attack reuse and revitalization from a variety of different angles.
So it sounds to me like you moved to a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Well, let's talk about the classes. You are the educational manager, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they could be really useful for people who own old houses. Some of them are in-person classes there for Minnesotans. However, you do offer a lot of digital resources. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going there.
Thanks. Yeah. Our education program started up about 7 years ago. And the goal was to provide resources, some skill building opportunities to homeowners primarily. And we started just in the Twin Cities, but over the years we've grown and tried to reach people not only by traveling throughout Minnesota, getting our classes in other communities, but also having virtual programs and digital resources. Obviously, the pandemic sort of forced that issue upon us in recent years. So we've been coming up with different tools for reaching our audience. We recognize that when a person or a family buys an older house, there's really no roadmap for helping them take care of that house, or at least it's not obvious, to many first-time home buyers. And our goal is to fill in these gaps, to say, like, hey, you can do this. You can repair your windows. You can create a maintenance plan for your home. You can take good care of this, repair and reuse what's already there, and make sure it lasts another 50, 100 years. We try to make our classes very approachable and friendly and fun. And so we have a great time. We gather on a Saturday at an old house and last Saturday we were fixing plaster cracks, and people were sharing their stories about their old homes and learning from each other in addition to our expert instructors. It's a great time.
Tell me a little bit about the digital resources, because for people who can't be there in person.
Yeah. So again, we realized at the beginning of the COVID pandemic that we could be reaching people in a variety of different ways, not just having them come to St. Paul, for an in-person class. So we built out this digital resource library on our website. It lives on our website. It's called our Rehab Resources. And it's, a collection of things we've sort of identified as valuable resources over the years: how-to guides, checklists for seasonal maintenance, videos about window repair. We've not only, done the internet searching for everybody and tried to cull the things that we find are most valuable, because there's a lot of stuff out there,
right,
of varying levels of usefulness. We've also created some of our own. So I work really closely with expert, window restorationists, plaster repair contractors, that sort of thing. And the content that they've created that might typically be shared in an in-person format, they've also put together in really nice, beautiful documents that are, folks can download and scribble notes on and use in their own projects. We've created some of our own demonstration videos too. So step-by-step window repair, that sort of thing. We have videos about salvaging quality materials from older homes, that sort of thing. So we've been trying to be creative and coming up with new ways of reaching our audience. And in fact, I think in 2020 we had our biggest audience growth yet, because we had so many virtual programs and we were reaching people from all over the country, which was really amazing, because I wasn't doing any work to find those people. They just found us.
They found you. Yeah. Well, you and I have a mutual friend in common in Joe Hayes.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
He's from Hayes Window Restoration, and he was actually on the show way back in season 1, episode 6. And I think that whole season was pretty much, I think I had 4 window restoration professionals that season, because that's all I knew. I thought I'm going to get all these people on the show, but half of them are going to know about windows. Yeah, that's really my passion project as well. So I'm very familiar, but Joe's wonderful, a very patient teacher and wonderful at what he does.
Absolutely. That's really the magic, is when we find these tradespeople, craftspeople who genuinely care about teaching the public about their skill, because Joe got into that business because he really loves and believes that old windows can be restored, right? We shouldn't be tearing them out and replacing them. And he wants to share that value with homeowners. And he's been a wonderful instructor of ours.
I also noticed that you have webinars, Zoom webinars. And that's something that, we have digital resources there that people can refer to, but there's also within the class offerings, You do have the Zoom webinars, and I thought they were really interesting topics, like, maybe not necessarily specifically for a homeowner in accessibility in historic downtowns, but such an interesting topic to hear from a different perspective or a new perspective. Not everybody knows anything about that. You also had a class, I believe, on hazardous materials such as lead and asbestos, which would be super useful for old homeowners for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially with some of those topics, they're not necessarily place specific. In some cases they are, but lead and asbestos show up in old houses of all eras or many eras and many places. And so folks can hopefully find that useful from wherever they live.
Right, right. Some of those classes have a fee and some of them are free. I actually signed up for 3.
Yay, that's awesome. That's great.
I was looking at them and I thought, I want to do this one and I want to do this one and I want to do this one. But I also really want to travel to St. Paul and Minneapolis to go to an in-person class. So maybe that'll happen at some point.
We would love that. That's great.
All right. Well, let's take a minute, if we could, to talk about sustainability. I know that's a huge component of Rethos. And in the old house community, a lot of random information floats about online via memes, the trades, even it's almost folklore in some ways. And all of that sometimes just becomes sound bites, in the absence of education. So I find myself being the kind of person who wants more cited sources, that sort of thing. And I don't know. So I just wondered how environmental sustainability in old buildings and homes is really playing out somewhere like the Twin Cities. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a great question. And you're pointing to something that is not only an effort Rethos is getting behind, but something I personally care very much about and try to live out as a value, And you're right, the soundbite, the greenest building is the one already built. We hear that a lot, and that is backed up by fact and science. It's just, we need to be willing to seek that out, I guess. And one of the classes that Rethos has been hosting for almost as long as the education program has been around is a class called Why Old is Green, and it's all about sustainability in older buildings. Why are old building materials, from old growth wood to the bricks and mortar, the concrete block, why is what is already in an old building the most sustainable option? And then also, why are the design of old buildings more sustainable than newer construction? We talk about overhangs creating shade. We talk about the usefulness of double hung windows creating air ventilation and cooling down our houses. We talk about these sort of sometimes unseen or unappreciated elements of older homes that actually contribute to lowering our energy bills. We also are, we're a proud member of an organization called Reuse Minnesota, which is all about reuse and repair of what we already have generated. A key concept that we talk about all the time is the embodied energy of our stuff. The idea that it takes energy to extract materials, to manufacture parts, to transport them to where they are. And when we have an old house that's full of old parts, it's just buzzing with this embodied energy, with this, it's already been created. And if we can tap into that, if we can actually reuse and repair what has already been created rather than putting pressure on our environment to create new materials, we are actually, living the most sustainable lifestyle that we can. So we try not only to teach our audience about the science behind this. What does embodied energy mean? How do we calculate that? How do we measure the value of old growth wood versus new growth wood, for example? But then we also try to give folks very practical hands-on resources to incorporate reuse and repair into their daily lives. Maybe you don't need the data behind it or the graphics. Those are super important and some people glom onto that. But how do I just, reduce my waste and reduce my energy bill as I'm living in this old home? And then I will just add to a third component of that is sort of demystifying and busting some myths about old homes. A lot of folks are like, oh, it's just a money pit. It's drafty. It's never going to, be as sustainable as this beautiful LEED certified building. Right. And again, back to those concepts we were talking about, but we can really, I think, cut through that perception by sharing resources, by sharing information, and having folks understand, like, oh yeah, I don't need to create something entirely new in order for me to be a sustainable person.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. And it's a cause that's near and dear to my heart too. I didn't want to come across as someone who didn't care. I'm like, wait, is that really true? Like, I want it to be true. Confirmation bias is real. I want that to be true so much. So I'm looking for that backing to prove what I think is right and what I think I want to do in the future, for sure.
Right.
So do you find that you are fighting an uphill battle there in Minnesota? I mean, is it kind of a constant struggle, or do you feel like there's some coming around at this point?
I think that in Minnesota, folks genuinely value our history and do understand how buildings can convey our history and why it's important to save buildings because of that. It's less easy and this is my personal experience, other people might have different thoughts on this, I guess, but I think it's less easy to bring people along for these economic or environmental arguments, to convince folks that it can be affordable to reuse this fourplex rather than build a brand new one and create affordable housing, or it's a more environmentally, conscientious choice to rehab versus create something new. Although in my personal life, when I have conversations with friends or family who are not of this, in this field, I start to explain it from that point of view, and their heads start to nod, and their eyes start to widen. They're like, "Oh, I get it. Like that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's just not quite yet a part of our, it's not quite yet a commonplace argument per se. People still think of preservation or reusing old buildings as a purely historic or heritage practice, not necessarily something that can create affordable housing or can reduce our impact on the environment and fight climate change."
Right, right.
So I think we're trying to make some of those really like tangible, practical arguments in a world that's not quite ready to hear them.
Sure.
I think here in Minnesota, we do have clear paths towards that. It's, people really love, caring for the environment here, being outside, valuing our green space and our water is a hugely valuable thing. And if we can make those connections between our built environment and our natural environment, I think we really have a chance at supporting our existing building stock. So I wouldn't necessarily call it an uphill battle. I would say it's a challenge, but something we're ready to fight,
right.
ready to work on.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really great. I wondered how it plays out in cities. I live next to a large city, Buffalo, New York, and they're doing a lot of reuse as well.
Yeah.
And there's been certain developers who've really taken this idea under their wing and turned these old buildings into fantastic new mixed-use spaces and apartments and even luxury condos, like all sorts of wild uses for these buildings that have just been sitting empty. So I see no problem with that.
Totally. Yeah. And in the Twin Cities, similarly, both Minneapolis and St. Paul had aging warehouse districts that have now become the hottest neighborhoods in the Twin Cities because of, the work of the state historic tax credit primarily, and the developers willing to take on those challenges. Right now, we're hoping to extend the state historic tax credit. It's still sort of in limbo. But because that has been just one of the only things that makes it make sense for developers to tackle these huge projects that can really be job creators and economic drivers. And so the evidence is there. We just need to make sure everybody sees it.
Right. Keep plugging away at the education part of it, right?
That's right.
Without shoving it down people's throats who don't want to hear it.
Fine line. Yeah.
Right. Well, since the state tax credits are, of course, state related, we're not going to get too in depth on that today because the show's for a broad audience. But I am curious about how rehabilitation looks. What does it look like in the residential space? Like, what sort of safety and efficiency upgrades have to occur when you use state tax credits or get a loan from Rethos for that matter?
Sure. So most of the rehab projects in Minnesota that are making use of the state historic tax credit are much larger, apartment developments, hotels. We've seen a lot of, schools turned into apartments, that sort of thing. So, and that's a separate program from what I'm more familiar with. I typically work, on the very small scale homeowner level, but I do know that those projects have to be really thoroughly vetted, and there's a lot of, requirements and restrictions if they're making use of this huge, government-backed, incentive program, that they have to follow, certain regulations. They work closely with our State Historic Preservation Office to make sure that they're not, ruining some of the character defining features, that sort of thing. And by the end of the day, these developers have shown how you can take a nearly empty cavernous warehouse and turn it into a quality, accessible living space, and something that is really, comfortable and is going to last you hopefully for another lifetime. So we have our historic rehabilitation loan program that supports developers in navigating these tax credit projects and offers them a slightly more affordable choice in working with a nonprofit to make those projects pencil out. And that program actually works beyond the bounds of Minnesota. Wherever there is a state historic tax credit, we can actually sort of apply our model to. So your next guest should be our real estate director, Ethan, because he would love to talk about the places he's traveled to and seen, some of these projects.
Going back to the education component of it, do you have any particular student success stories you want to share, or anything that people have gleaned and learned from the educational program there at Rethos?
Yeah, definitely. One that comes to mind is a couple from a handful of years ago, actually. They attended a few classes of Rethos. They attended a window repair class, I think a plaster repair class, and then attended a wood floor refinishing course. And that was a 2-part class that we had on site at a local workshop, a wood floor company. And they were so excited. They were ready to go home and do their wood floors. But they called me up and said that they would like to host our next session of this wood floor refinishing class. So they had this awesome house in the Dayton's Bluff neighborhood of St. Paul, which is, a lot of late 19th, early 20th century, very modest single family homes in this really beautiful house they had just poured a lot of care into, and they were ready to refinish their wood floors. And so they hosted a refinishing class on a Thursday evening, I remember. And so we hauled all of this machinery into their living room. They had cleared out all of their furniture, and our instructor was demonstrating how to use the sander and all of this stuff. And we all left, packed up for after the class was over. We had, 10 or 12 interested homeowners there on site, learning how to do it. And over the course of the next week, the homeowners did all of the refinishing themselves, the sanding themselves. And, they showed us their checklists, and they showed us their texts between each other when they were just so angry that they were so tired of sanding. It's backbreaking work.
It's really very much.
Yeah. And so a week later, then the class, we all came back to the house where they had, completely sanded. And then the session that evening was all about finishing.
Oh, nice.
And finding the right, stain and all of that stuff. So it was a really great story of folks opening up their home to us and allowing us to come in, allowing other homeowners to come in and learn. And they also were literally in the midst of doing the project themselves. That model has actually worked quite well for us over the years, where a homeowner literally opens up their house to us and says, "Hey, I have these windows I want to work on. I'm going to be doing it anyway, but I'd love to have people learn alongside me." And so we call these our rehab labs, where we host a class in an old house, and people can come and kind of get messy and practice. It's very much not only our instructors training or teaching, the homeowners as students, but everybody kind of learning from each other and alongside each other, and sharing their own experiences, and then going home and taking what they've learned and doing it themselves. So we're trying to collect more of these stories. You can actually find the floors refinishing story on our website, but we have a handful of other stories with great before and after photos on our website of, homeowners who have tackled these projects and really did excellent projects.
And I can see how, even though if a homeowner who's listening here couldn't go to Twin Cities and go to a class, but I could see how they could take that model and maybe use it in their own community for the same purpose.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm already picturing having people over at my house and redoing my windows.
Totally, yes.
I've got some work. I've got some work for people to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to talk really quickly about this idea of deconstruction. And that I was looking at it, and Rethos uses the term deconstruction, and I just love that. I think in the old house world, we still call it demo, or we're salvaging architectural material, but thinking about it in terms of taking a house apart, it almost humanizes, or at least it sort of dignifies the process. And I feel like just, it was likely that someone constructed it with pride and care. And so why can we not deconstruct it with the same respect? I really love that. And I wondered, what is Rethos' part in deconstruction? Like, where do these parts go? How often does that occur in your organization?
That's a really beautiful way of describing it, because that's the key, is care. Our houses, our buildings were constructed with care in a much more patient way than we build today. And rather than mechanically demolishing a home, throwing it all in a dumpster and transporting it to a landfill, we can, if we have the resources and skills, carefully take it apart and salvage, the pieces of it. I believe the statistic now is that about 80 or 85% of material from a typical residential demolition project could be reused or recycled. So we are literally throwing perfectly good material in the trash every single day. And from Rethos' point of view, while we always love to see a home or a building reused as a whole, restored or revitalized in one piece, we know that demolition and destruction of our built environment happens all of the time. And if we salvage usable parts, those can actually live and continue on in our, local economy. And I have a friend who refers to it as like an organ donor metaphor. They can actually be put back into, rehab projects or into new construction and extend existing buildings' lives. So statewide in Minnesota, we are working, I participate in conversations and planning all the time with folks who are really interested in making deconstruction simply the alternative to demolition, making it easier for that to be the norm. But for right now, until that becomes a statewide policy, right now, Rethos is just trying to make sure that people know that deconstruction is an option, that if they're even renovating their kitchen, they can carefully take apart the cabinets that are already there, give them to the local, salvage store, and somebody else might find them useful, rather than completely demoing. Although it's fun, right, to like tear stuff apart and whatever, we can do it carefully and make sure that we continue on the life of our usable objects and usable materials.
That's great. All right. So generally speaking, what do you think that homeowners everywhere can take away from the work that Rethos is doing primarily there in the Midwestern United States?
I think the number one thing we try to convey is that owning a home and caring for a home doesn't have to be as daunting or expensive as it's often made out to be. And obviously there's a whole, number of reasons you should be, careful and thoughtful about buying a house and caring for an old house. It's a big thing to do, right? But when it comes to an older home, there are resources out there. There are people who are willing to teach you, and plenty of digital and online resources too, if you can't get yourself to a class or to in person with somebody. But you really can, if you take it piece by piece, step by step, you really can do it. You really can care for an old house and do it right, do it well, and make sure that it remains a sustainable, comfortable place for you to live in for a long time. So really, it's about kind of demystifying and making it much less of a scary process than it might otherwise be.
Before we say goodbye today, could you please tell us how and where we can find Rethos to learn more about the organization and to utilize those digital resources? Also, I want to say one more thing too, that class on green.
Why old is green?
Yes. It is available again in March. I think there's a webinar in March.
That's correct. Yes. March 16th, I believe. Yeah. Anyone's welcome to that. Yeah.
And I'll link to all of this in the show notes. So go ahead.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah. So our website, rethos.org, rethos.org. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and all of the places. We also have a magazine, a quarterly magazine. And if you go to our website, you can sign up and get a digital copy or a physical copy if you prefer. So all of our, our class schedule and the rehab resources, those are all on our website for everyone to explore.
Thank you so much for being here today, Natalie.
Thank you, Stacy. This was great. Appreciate it.
I enjoyed my time with you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to my guests, Natalie Heneghan and Fire Chief Roger LeBlanc. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow True Tales from Old Houses and Blake Hill House on Facebook and Instagram. For bonus content and special offerings, please consider becoming a subscriber on our brand new Patreon. And if you're looking for more information about this episode, including photos, show notes, coupon codes from our sponsors, and to request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Till next time.